I want to think through some of the ideas that I'm going to be developing for a presentation at the Media Ecology Association conference at St. Mary's University coming up this summer. The conference theme is about media ecology, technology, and spirituality. Very interesting combination of topics. And so I'm preparing a paper that I've titled A Communicative Cosmos, subtitled Toward a Whiteheadian Media Ecology. And I think actually, now that I read that, I'm going to put toward in the first part of that title, because I think I can present the outlines, at least, of a Whiteheadian media ecology in this talk, but that's only a movement towards what we might call a communicative cosmology. I'm trying to depict the cosmos, the largest order of things that we human beings are capable of imagining, maybe, with God's help, and if not directly with God's help, then at least with the help of the God we don't believe in, so that we can oppose our atheism to the old dogmatic form of belief called theism, and thereby lift ourselves up into an enlightened posture, an enlightened view of the world, no longer limited by, Aquinas and Dante's or Aristotle's understanding of the anthropocentric vision of the world, and instead, the modern atheistic materialist has, by contrasting themselves morally and epistemologically to the theist, to the religious believer, the modern scientific rational empiricist materialist lifts themselves up and claims for their own perspective a kind of theological authority, no longer called a theology, but just called, I guess, physics or cosmology, perhaps. But I think, as I've argued in the past, when I bring Whitehead into conversation with contemporary physical cosmologists, people like Neil deGrasse Tyson, people like Stephen Hawking, and others who aren't so popular, like Scharf, who studies galaxies and the supermassive black holes at the center of galaxies, and showing how the latest, most advanced understanding of the universe at large is in fact quite organic in character, quite historical and evolutionary in nature, which is how we used to think of life, right? In the Newtonian framework, the physical world doesn't evolve in the sense of, self-organize, become more complex, right? Supercharged particles, in a cloud of plasma becoming helium, hydrogen, and hydrogen atoms, and then those atoms becoming stars, and those stars becoming galaxies, and stars exploding, reassembling with heavier elements, creating planets that come to life, not just with individual cells and multicellular organisms on the surface, but the one example we have of life, and indications from other planets who have gone through a climate change to make life far less likely. What we can see about the history of life on Earth is that it has always been a planetary affair, in the sense that the living organisms on the surface have been in a complex, recursive, reciprocating relationship with minerals, with the oceans, with the atmosphere, so that the very tectonic movements of the plates of the geosphere are intimately woven together with the life cycles of plankton, right, coccolithophores, I believe, who produce these beautiful microscopic spherical shells with intricate patternings that Ernst Haeckel was famous for drawing. So life is a planetary affair. The primary organism is Gaia, and bacteria, plants, animals, fungi, we are all, expressions of, or microcosmic expressions of that macrocosmic organism, Gaia. But in fact, Gaia too is a repetition of the cosmic organism, right? The organism that we dimly apprehend, perhaps, through a glass darkly with our observation of the background radiation or quantum fluctuation, a statistical array of the quantum fluctuations that gave rise to the asymmetry that kicked into gear this, yes, ultimately entropic process, but that it's clear that if entropy reigns in our universe, it must have been wound up at the beginning. It must have been at a state of super low, perhaps infinitely low entropy at the origin state, at the singularity, in order for it to then be falling down in the way that it appears to be now. But of course, with so-called dark energy and dark matter, the accelerating rate at which the edge of the observable universe is expanding away from us, and the way that Einstein's gravitational equations don't account for, don't predict the observed motions of stars around the edges of galaxies, we can see that our understanding of energy as entropic is missing something. We can't understand the self-organization of a galaxy if we assume that energy is ultimately entropic. But of course, already in the late second half of the 20th century, let's say, and now on into the 21st, there's an understanding of entropy and of nonlinear, irreversible chemical processes, that the complexity and the chaos gives rise to order, and in a way that when in certain isolated systems, this movement towards dissipation, this increasing of entropy, can also serve the increasing of complexity. Because, for example, when you look at the energy gradient of the sun, the surface of the earth, and deep space, there's a differential created there, and because of the entropic tendency of nature, the earth wants to radiate out the energy it receives from the sun, because deep space at like 2 Kelvin is way cooler than the temperature of the light on the surface of the earth, right? So the earth's trying to reflect it all to get rid of the heat that the sun is bombarding it with. But it turns out that more of that energy from the sun can be dissipated by the earth if the earth, through geochemical reactions, is able to organize into a higher grade form of physical and chemical activity that we call biological, and thereby increase the rate of entropy dissipation, right? So more organization, centropy you could call it, drives the increase in entropy in this local environment that we call the earth. And then, when you get to human organisms, it's like another whole, it's like to the next power, the way that human beings extract entropy from the earth and dissipate it, right? Drilling for oil, releasing more energy in the past several generations at the so-called petroleum interval than perhaps has ever been released before. Maybe an asteroid impact will have end up having the same sort of planetary impact that the Anthropocene is generating. What the point is that we're on the level of a meteorite impact, right? The human industrial presence on the planet is initiating mass extinction, the sixth great mass extinction, where more than 70% of species, sometimes 90% of species, have gone extinct 5 times prior, right? The first one being the oxygen crisis. So here we are again, and human beings are doing it. And, I was supposed to be talking about media ecology, right? Media theory, technology, spirituality, but I think, this metaphor of the medium is really what I've been playing with throughout this whole tangent, seemingly. Gaia as metaphor, as medium, Gaia as medium, Earth as medium, right? And I think media ecology, having appropriated that metaphor, Neil Postman appropriating that metaphor, carrying media theory forward from McLuhan and his Catholic mysticism into a more prophetic critique of the dominant forms of so-called mass media. Media ecology should be ready to take in this new Gaian cosmopolitics, ultimately. And of course Bruno Latour has spoken a lot about this. So I think, yeah, Earth as medium, cosmos as medium, right? I know the conference theme is partially about technology, and I think human beings having come to awareness of their embeddedness in this Gaian ecosystem and this cosmological organism or ecology, community of self-organizing creatures, we've required a lot of technology to do all of that measuring, to calculate all of that data. And so there's no question that the technological apparatus that now, as McLuhan would say, has amputated so much of what we used to have to do with our physiology, using our sensory organs, that, we exist in a new kind of universe, a second nature, as, philosophers used to call it, that sort of sits atop and internally represents or recreates primary nature, first nature, the physical world, right? But at the same time, we human beings are expressions of the physical world, and the whole point of trying to understand media, not just as a human technological contrivance, but as something that organisms have always been doing, and sort of to reverse the metaphor that Postman borrowed, to say that it's not just that media is like an ecology, it's media is ecology, which I know is still a metaphor, but I mean it ontologically here. And so the whole point is to reconnect human art, artifice, technology with nature, the way that nature expresses itself. And I think that Whitehead allows us to do that. So with that sort of, I think that's kind of like a preamble. I want to get into what I've written to sort of, just orienting thoughts to guide my inquiry into what a Whiteheadian media ecology might look like.